Okay, we're live. Back again, J.E. Krieger, author of the books of 9 and 10 Penance. And I was determined to do it. Here I am, Saturday night. I blew off Saturday night for you guys. All right. I am here to give writerly advice, real advice from the streets. The kind of advice you can't get anywhere else. Yes, I am sitting at a desk. I realize the irony, and you're not going to get the phony bookshelf wall behind me. This is what you're going to get. It's real and it's cruddy. But you're going to get real, authentic writer advice and not the hokey stuff you get online. And that's why I'm doing this live video. So we're going to get into it. All right, first off, the internet gurus of the world. If I could just push them all aside, they're trying to tell you how to produce more content, how to, smile a lot. Look at the camera and smile. Just make sure you're always smiling. And I am just overly disgusted with any advice they can give you on the internet. I've heard it all. There's some gal online. She's real popular. She's released, she says, I've been an author for 5 golly years, and I've released over 20 books. Well, we don't want that advice. We don't need it. We don't need you to tell us how to use Canva to make an ordinary cover that the last guy made. All right, we want real advice from the streets. All right. So I've compiled some thoughts and I've compiled some notes. These are my books, by the way, and I thought I'll be using them for reference tonight. And proof that I am a writer. I've got 3 novels. I did all the covers myself. I'm sure the gurus will tell you I broke every convention and I'm not going to become a successful millionaire. But I can tell you right now, all the advice they can give you on the internet to sell more books, I've only found one tried and true way. And that is really just to get out there and do book signings. And how do you get book signings? It's not easy. You gotta knock on everyone's door. And you will get 99 no's before you get 1 yes. So, that'll work. And aside from that, well, maybe I'll start with this here. I've got a hidden secret for every writer out there, hiding right behind me. If you are a writer or want to be a writer, you need one of these. It's called a thesaurus. Okay, go out and find one. Not just any thesaurus. Throw your dictionary in the trash. As English teachers might need a dictionary, but a writer does not. That's all you need is a good quality thesaurus. I found this one from the 70s. I think it's from the 70s, and it's my writer's Bible because I think it was written by hippies. I mean, the descriptions they give are certainly LSD induced. No joke. So if you can find a copy, I have 2. If I find another one, I will keep it. So yeah, like I said, I got sick of the internet gurus telling you useless information. And one thing they never go over is the tactful advice you can get just for writing. Things that you should probably focus on. And I got my trusty computer here with me because I did write a prompt on writing. It's the openings of books. And I couldn't stress that enough. If you're going to write a story and you're stuck, always concentrate on the opening. This book here, my first novel, which I've been reading chapters from on my channel, there were like 12 solid openings that I wrote from the ground up and completely erased until I found the right one. It's painful, but it's what you got to do. So, and they say you need that valuable hook to hook everyone in. I don't know if that's 100% true um, for a writer. Um, you know, you do need a hook. It doesn't need to be, you're an unknown author, an unknown writer. You're trying to learn how to write. You know, write how you feel comfortable. Write what makes you feel comfortable. And don't sweat. If you feel good about your opening, then that's good enough. Believe me. This is the opening I wrote for this book, for the Magic Paintbrush. And I'll just read the first few lines. I'm not going to drone on. In the Holbein Museum of Fine Art, where nothing interesting ever happened and no one ever had anything interesting to say, an inquisitive young boy wandered from room to room. There you have it. That's my opening line. And I've had experts look at it and they say, well, if nothing interesting ever happens, then how is this an explosive opening? I can tell, I've talked to a lot of agents and editors in the industry, gone to multiple conventions, and agents and all the people in the industry are not writers. I'm telling you, they are not writers. The only recommendations they take is from their other snooty friends, and that's an honest reality. And that was the opening for that book, which I really enjoyed. I thought it hooked a reader. And the other one, let's see, I did this one for the third novel when I got real ballsy for The Tale of Yelizelsky and the Unicorn. I'll read to you the opening. If I don't know if we're going to get a... Anyways, the opening, I'll read. Once upon a time in a kingdom not far. Well, as you can imagine, if you're a writer out there taking advice from internet gurus in the industry, they're going to tell you not to open up with once upon a time, but I did anyways. Ha! Defy all odds. You have to feel comfortable with your own story and not worry so much about what others think. And that's, you're never going to get your head above water, and you're going to end up writing 20 books of pointless dribble. And that's just a fact. But I don't know why these internet gurus, they tell you how to sell this stuff. You got to pay up front or something, but they never talk about the writing. I'm livid with it. Anyways, so you want an opening that you're comfortable with, and that's, and I'll try and reference my document here. I wish I could send this out to people somehow. If you're going to sit down to write a story, know your word count ahead of time. That is so crucially important. So even for a novel, I know it seems like a giant leap because it's a big novel you got to write. But believe me, you're going to want to know that word count ahead of time so you know how long your opening is, how long it's going to take to get to the middle, and when you're going to reach that inevitable end. But it'll also help determine chapter size. For instance, The Magic Paintbrush, young adult fantasy written for, a younger audience. You don't want the chapters to be extensively large. So I think, I don't know how many pages is that, like 230 pages? 220 pages? I think that's fair. So that, kind of helped me divide up the chapters and know how long they need to be, and it also helped with pacing. Oh, what else? Yeah, the thesaurus, sorry. I love it. We got... So the other thing I stressed enough, I've talked to a lot of writers over the years, and they've scratched their heads at me, and they don't know. I can tell when they're going to stick with it and when they're not. So I'm going to give you some advice, and I think you should stick with it if you want to be a writer. You need to build a word list ahead of time. So you're going to write a whole novel, and you're just going to blindly walk into it. I suggest getting the thesaurus and building a word list before you start, um, and understand the terminology and the dialogue and the narrative ahead of time, so that you're not just fumbling through things. Um, let's see. Yeah, like I said, I was going to reference these books. So, like with this book, I wrote poetry for the book before that didn't even make it in the book. I wrote dialogue for the book before I even wrote the book. And I went through a thesaurus and I started writing down, building word lists. And so the story is about a boy trapped in a painting. It delves into a lot of art history. So I thought to myself, what subjects of art history do I want to go over? One of them is the Rococo movement, regionalism, Cubism. So I had to build and catalog word lists within the framework of those movements, so that when I'm writing specifically in chapters, I can, here, we'll put up my poetry book so you have something funner to look at. So that when I get to writing those sections in the book, I already have a word list built up. And I can be more familiar, at least in the writing side of it, with the narrative that needs to be present. Let's see if I can even find that chapter. And I did a chapter in here on, I guess maybe I won't reference it. I did a chapter in there on seascapes. So I had to do a bunch of research on seascape paintings and terminology. Boring stuff. And believe me, you build up all those word lists and you might not use everything. There's one chapter in there on M.C. Escher. So the main character follows along through an Escher maze. And if you don't know who Escher is, he did a lot of mathematical artwork. So I had to look up mathematical terms. And yeah, so I built a word list that way. But each novel's different, like this one here. The Tale of Yulizelsky and the Unicorn, yeah. So I wanted to look at it this way. Dark was the night. That's a sentence, right? Dark was the night. So there's two words in that sentence, dark and night. Well, how many times in a novel can you repeat the word dark and describe it as night? So you want to build a word list ahead of time. So I read this in people's work all the time when I edit. You don't want to keep using the word dark over and over and over. You want to find new ways to discuss those things, or to describe something. That's just the way it is, and it's especially true with poetry. I'll put up my other poetry book here. That's especially true with poetry. If you're a poet or if you're a writer and you've got poetry, go through your own poetry and you'd be surprised that if you laid all your poetry out, you printed it out, and you were to lay it all down on the floor, get a highlighter out, and you're going to go, oh, okay, here's this line from this poem, highlight it because I really like it. Go through your other poems and see if you wrote that same line in another poem. I'll bet you did. It'll make you rethink your own poetry. So people tend to repeat themselves a lot. They just don't realize it. And that happens a lot when you start out with writing. Certainly with the novel, The Magic Paintbrush, my first novel, there was a few lines that I put in there that were one line I remember specifically I repeated 5 or 6 times. So I had to go through and I think I ended up pulling out every line that I had repeated. And then I made a joke about it in this book here. And this one here, I repeated a line twice, but I was aware of it. And so, That's just kind of how you end up working it. All right, let's see here. Real authentic street advice. Oh, well, let's see if I can find something better to talk about. The size always matters, so hopefully you guys are doing that. Oh, well, that's the arc. Beginning, middle, end. Every story has that. The rule of three. There we go. Maybe I'll talk about that. The rule of three, which, so if you're going to write an entire novel, I always encourage people to write short stories first and become a short story writer before you become a novelist, because if it's going to help you build up a skill level, because when you write your first novel, you don't want to throw it in the trash, but you probably should. So instead of throwing away 240 pages or 500 pages in the trash, write a short story, 20, 30 pages, whatever, and edit that, learn how to edit from your short stories, and then throw those in the trash. And then once you get along so far, you feel more comfortable, you can write a whole novel without looking back and going, wow, I wasted a lot of time on that. But the rule of three is very important. So if you write a short story, hopefully you've done a good job and everything is very precise and leads you towards the end, if you've learned how to do that. Now, when you write a whole novel, let's face facts, you're just filling space. Because if I were to edit any one of my books down, you should be able to take any novel really and edit it down to a paragraph, and that should tell you the whole story. So really a whole novel, I think The Magic Paintbrush, the short story, was 20 pages or something, 30 pages. And then I expanded it by 200 pages. So there was a lot of fluff in between, and I really had to start stretching things out and making things up. So I came up with the rule of three, and that's where you're writing a chapter, you want to think of three things for that chapter, three things that are going to drive it, three major scenes, a beginning, an opening, or a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're frustrated, I don't know what to do. Keep it simple. Think of three driving points to move it forward. Let's see if I can think of, I think I did Fragonard's Dream in the Garden of Rococo. That's one of the chapters in that book. So Fragonard borrows the magic paintbrush, and then he paints the garden to life, and then the garden tries to eat him. Those are 3 points right there. Boom, done. Right? It's not complicated. You don't have to overthink it. So you really have to start thinking in those terms. And just to give you an idea, so like for this book, I had to simplify it. It was my first novel. I threw away 9 chapters. I just pulled it out, 9 chapters out of the book, and realized that I was overstuffing it. I was not balanced, and I threw away 9 whole chapters. I think it was this book here, The Greatest Storm. I got better at writing with this one, and I didn't throw away any chapters, but a third of the novel got thrown out because I just kept repeating myself. So you have to be truthful and honest and admit that that's a problem I see a lot. I talk to readers or writers, and they get frustrated and upset with me, but I say, look, that 2 pages you wrote, or that 5 pages you wrote, or whatever, is it really that important to the storyline? And did you already kind of maybe, did you already make that point? Do we really need 4 more pages to prove the same point over and over and over again? Probably not. So you're going to have to get really comfortable with throwing out your own work. And for the magic paintbrush, even, like I said, I threw away 9 chapters, and I wrote 12 solid openings, 12 first chapters for that book that I threw away. And when I say that, what I mean is maybe half of them I was really happy with, and I still have them and read them from time to time. But I had to be honest with myself and say, but it doesn't fit the storyline. So I need to throw them away. And so that's the tough part that you kind of have to, that's the hurdle you have to get over. But don't worry, because the best writing advice you can give is the advice you can give to yourself. You're not going to find it from other people. I've tried it when I first started out as a writer, getting advice from people. I was desperate for it, like a lot of people are when they start writing. But the problem is that most people, either they're not readers. If they are a reader, they're only reading what they like to read. They could care less about what you're reading. That's just the way it is. So you have to learn how to, and I do a lot of editing work, but you have to, when I look at other people's work, I respect the fact that this is not what I typically would read, but I'm going to respect that you're trying to craft and mold a story that comes from your heart. So I'm not going to knock it down a peg just because it's not an artistic fantasy like my novel. That's just the way it is. So getting advice from people is tough, and I've talked to a lot of agents out there, a lot of people in the industry, and they're very singular minded. So they're going to think that your novel's trash, but they don't represent that kind of work. They don't typically read that kind of work. So, of course, they're not going to understand it. You know, what my one friend say all the time, you need a spicy romance. That's what sells. You got to get a spicy romance. But I don't write that. But anyways, so the rule of 3, and if you're just starting out with writing, I've got it written down here in my computer. I can draw off of that. Think of 3 characters, a main character, right? You got to have a hero, a villain, and a side character. 3 characters, don't think of any more. 3 objects to insert in the story, 3 scenes or scenery, right? That's it. Just work off the rule of 3 and never go above that number. And if you do that for a while, you're going to develop skills as a writer, and then you can get a little more technical and complicated over time. Oh, that was a nice prompt I did. So I did, in this prompt, I thought of the character Mr. Hopeful. That's obviously maybe a hero. Mr. Hopeful is 3 things that describe Mr. Hopeful: optimistic, trying his best, and brave. And that displays a nice dynamic and an arc. So Mr. Hopeful starts off, and this works in the same narrative as the story, starts off as optimistic. So Mr. Hopeful's, that's the opening. And then we get to the arc of the story. Mr. Hopeful is trying his best. And then we get to the end of the story, and Mr. Hopeful is brave because we need to, overcome that challenge. And so kind of think in those terms. And the rule of 3, develop your own rule of 3. Let's see, move past that. Ooh, let's go over some editing parts here. Okay, so the room, I like to talk about this subject. I like to call it the room. And I find it in everyone's work. I even find it in printed works, printed novels out there, and people's stories. Here, I'll put this back up. I like to call it the room, or being self-aware of the room you're in. Ooh. So, oftentimes, when people start writing out, they write real fast, but they don't take the time to slow down and think about what they're doing. Well, a character will be in a room, and they keep going in and out of that room, okay? Or they keep going in and out of some scenery or whatever, and they kind of lose track. But ask yourself, how many times can that character in a chapter or whatever, or in a scene, go in and out of that damn room? And I sit them down and I go, look, they can only do, come on, be realistic here. They go into the room, they talk to a character, they leave the room, they go off, they do something else. If you're hyper aware of it, then you can make that part of the narration in the speech, but the reader also has to be hyper aware of it. So watch out for it. I was reading someone's story not long ago where the character went on this journey and they had lost the concept of night and day because it seemed like every other paragraph, it was the middle of the night and then it was blistering hot out. It was, the sun was out. And I don't think they knew. And the other thing, too, that I've always thought about when I'm writing is what position is the sun in? Or if the moon's out, is it a full moon? Well, if you go to the next night, you're on the next scene and it's the next night. Okay, well, it can't be a full moon 2 nights in a row. So you're going to have to start writing these things down and thinking these things out. What's the other one? Double sentencing. Double sentencing. I have really upset a lot of writers with this advice. So a lot of times I'll read over people's work and they will reiterate that point 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times when all they need to do is write it down once. So when you read over your own work, you might go over that paragraph or that whole page and go, wait a second. And less is more with writing. I am telling you, this book right here was, I don't know, 500 pages too long when I first wrote it. Less is more. When I figured that out, I whittled it down to 230 pages. You don't need to beat the point to the punch. Look at it this way, because when you're writing and you're first starting off, you think you have to overly explain it to that reader or to yourself. When you have to stop and ask yourself, is the situation they're in already explaining the mood, feeling, and atmosphere? So do I really need to convey that message with my words? Or is the situation that characters found themselves in already explaining all of that? Right? So you don't need to reiterate it twice. Let's see. And then I'll go to, run-on sentences. Feel free to use as many run-on sentences as you want. You're not in English class anymore. Have those as many run-on sentences as you want. You go wild. You do you. I live for run-on sentences. Let's see here. Different types of edits. Ooh. Yeah, so when you edit your work, and I'll just talk about this briefly. When you edit your work, you're going to want, one of my recommendations too, especially when you've finished writing the book or a short story or whatever, just read it, mistakes and all. Don't edit anything. And if it takes a couple tries, just read it for what it is and then come back to it, okay? Because a lot of times we can edit things out. We need to be aware of what's going on in our story. And if we just start editing, we're going to lose track. So read it a few times before you start to edit. You're going to want, and I have it all written here. So you can look at the overall big picture of the story. You're looking for flow from page to page. Don't worry so much about grammar and punctuation. I never do. And I know that sounds strange, but it's not a final proof. So grammar and punctuation can change at any moment. Um, and I like to save that for like closer to the end of writing. And a lot of times, sometimes what I'll do, I don't recommend always doing it. I'll put a thought in, because I want to keep writing. So I'll say, well, maybe something like this should happen, but I don't know what it is. And then I'll just come back to it later on. Or, I'll type something out and I know I've misspelled something, but I don't worry about it. And I'll just look it up later on. Or I'll put a filler word in too. And that's always nice because it's true, people do use too many adjectives. Um, so it's okay, just put that adjective in there or whatever, or that verb. When because you're going to need a thesaurus. Where's that hiding? You're going to need your thesaurus because people are reusing the same words over and over and over again. And you need to break that habit. That's why you need to write out dialogue ahead of time. That's why you need to write false narration before you start writing a full-length novel, because we need to break the habit of using repetitive word usage over and over again. So you want your story to be unique and have its own voice, then you're gonna have to get the thesaurus out and figure out different ways to express something. If you're feeling cold, right? Like if a character's cold, it's I'm cold. Well, that's kind of that's fine. The whole novel doesn't need to be this big explosive journey through words, but every now and then you kind of want some wit put into it. So you're going to have to figure out, if my character's cold, how do I say that without using words that we already know? They're chilly. Okay, well, how many times can you in a novel say that a character's chilly? How many different ways can you express that? And that's kind of what you want to look at. Oh, this is another one I have fun with, and I don't know if I can do that tonight. I don't know how long I want this to go on. When you're editing and a sentence doesn't work, write it backwards. Just write it backwards. Because you're like, I feel like I'm there, but I'm not quite there. Just write the sentence backwards or remove it entirely. In fact, every time I sit down to edit somebody's work, somebody's new to the game, I'm fully aware that there's a lot. They're just going to have to start throwing out a lot of sentences. But I ask him right away, what's your favorite sentence in this thing you've written? And boy, this is where they end up hating me. And then they'll say, well, here it is. And I says, you should remove that from your from your book or from your short story. And they don't like hearing that. But the truth is that sentence or whatever that's near and dear to your heart, that you poured your soul into, and you said, that's me as a writer, is usually really bad because you don't take time to critically think about it. And it's unfortunate, but that's just what happens. Where I'll read, it's, the sun was out on the darkest of nights. You might fall in love with that sentence, but the reality is it can't be dark out and the sun's out at the same time. That just doesn't work. I'm just going over my list here, my writer's prompt that I wrote for myself. Punctuation, let's see here. Most people, I've even heard this from people in the industry, they don't understand how punctuation actually works. Your English teacher will never be able to help you on this one. It's going to be a blank stare. So punctuation is up to you. You decide punctuation. Nobody gets to decide it for you. The more creative you can get, great. An exclamation point does not mean that a character is screaming and yelling. All right? That's not what that means. I'd be careful using too many, but the reality is an exclamation point just means you're emphasizing something. You know, their voice is raised. This is important. That's all that means. Commas. People go over comma placement. Well, honestly, you can put a comma wherever you want. Wherever you want. It's a pause in the sentence. It's a pause in speaking. So put a comma wherever you want. I think it's this book here where I really went to town. When I figured out how to write and I stopped listening to the internet gurus, that's where I was like, oh, there's some section in that book I did where I was like, comma, 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 comma. I let you, the reader, even know that. So just be cautious about it. But let's see here, question marks. Oh, well, I won't go over that, but you can. I'm trying not to be too advanced here. I wrote this prompt, but there's 2 ways to write it for more advanced writing and for people starting out. Oh yeah, I love that one. You are your own reader, you make the call. So it's your book, you make the call. You have to build up your own set of rules. If you want to be a writer, the worst thing you can do is listen to other people. Don't tell anyone you're a writer. Oh, here we go. The average writer can produce as little as 1 sentence a day. So I've known so many writers out there that say, I wrote 2 chapters today, and I just laugh because I'm like, no, you didn't. You did not write 2 chapters. Throw it out. Throw it away. It might take me a week to write a chapter. Yeah, a whole week. If the juices are flowing, I might write a chapter in a day. That could happen. But I'm going to be editing that chapter for the next 3-4 days. And that's just the first round where I hit myself in the head. So I know to take it slow when I write. But it should take you, 3 days to write a chapter. But you're not going to write consistently like that. You're not going to write, whether like 21 chapters in here times 3. That's not how long it's going to take you to write the book. Some chapters might take a month. We don't know. But let's see. What else do I got? Query letters. Oh, that kind of got to the end. Anyways, I probably will wrap it up because I had one person say hello. Hello, Talha 27. Anyways, that's my street advice from a writer's standpoint. And hopefully I've been doing chapter readings from the Magic Paintbrush. When I get done with that, I think I got a week and a half left of reading from that book on my YouTube channel. When I get done with that, maybe I'll dive back into more specified videos on writing advice. Well, here we go. I'll go over this. Somebody wrote it, and then somebody else took credit for it. I'm not even joking. I took this class on writing, and someone sold me this book, and I read over it, and I go, oh my God, you didn't write this. They were a professional in the industry, too. I'm not going to say who. They were pretty high up, and I was like, you didn't write this. This was written in the 70s, and I can source the author, but they acted like they wrote it. But it's the 5 points that you need to write any story. Doesn't matter, fiction, nonfiction, whatever. You need a hero, you need a situation, you need a goal, you need a villain, and you need disaster. So you need the hero, the thing that you champion to win. It can be a person, place, or thing. You need a situation. Well, what's the situation? We want to know what's at stake. What do we stand to lose or gain, or both? What's the goal? That's different than the situation. The overall objective of the plot. It can be deep and meaningful or simple and to the point. Such as, and I wrote some examples here, finish studying for test. That could be your goal. Dye your hair the right color. And the situation for that is we dyed it the wrong color. Get gold back from dragon, right? What's the situation? The dragon took the gold. Oh, and my favorite one, learn to enjoy Mondays. All right. So the villain, here we go, is, what is the villain? The villain is what's holding the hero back or keeping them from obtaining their goal. And this can also be a person, place, or thing. So the villain could be a sinking boat, right? Be as creative as you want. It could be an island of snakes. It could be an evil chicken. These are just examples I wrote. And the disaster. And that's also crucially important. That's different than a situation. So you need some kind of turmoil, even if it's mundane. So what started all of this? What's the I hate Mondays. I need to learn to like them. All right. And I think that'll do. But anyways, yeah, so hopefully some of this, and I've already given a lot of this advice, I think, on YouTube, short videos of it, but I wanted to give a longer one because I get to do live videos because I had enough subscribers that allowed me to do that. Yeah, just authentic street advice from a writer. Hey, if you're listening to this, leave something in the comments if you want me to talk about in writing. Honestly, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I suppose I could listen to those internet gurus out there and get myself a fake wall of books behind me and then jazz it up and then get a great writing voice going and all of that. But this is what you get if you want real advice from a writer. I can't imagine a writer would be anything remotely close to what we typically see on the internet. That's just not the way it is. So most of them are out of touch. A lot of the stuff we see on the internet out of touch with reality, because honestly, writing, you're indoors all the time. You're in a closet. That's what I did all day. For my Saturday, I sat at home and I wrote. That's what you got to do. And turn the music off. You want to be a good writer, don't have anything going on in the background. All right. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.